Right then, so today we're going to talk about the collective mind. It's lesson 12 and it's the collective mind. There are two lessons on the collective mind, and this is the first one. So this first lesson, Collective Mind 1, is where we're going to discuss the fabric of the collective mind. That means the structure of the collective mind, how the collective mind is made up, what it's made up of, how it's made, and actually moving around the collective mind and the movements of energy around the collective mind, that sort of thing. Now, just so you're aware, Collective Mind 2, the second lesson, will be about the astral planes. And we'll talk a tiny little bit about the astral planes in this lesson, just so that you're aware, so we give a definition of what they are. But yeah, the second lesson will be based mostly around the astral planes. So let's get back to lesson 1, the collective mind, the fabric of the collective mind, the structure of the collective mind. Now, before we actually start and talk about the collective mind, we want to use an analogy. We want to use an analogy for the collective mind. It's an analogy, but well, it's kind of an analogy, I suppose, but it's also an example. It's an example of how this sort of thing can happen in nature already, that exists already. And here we go to the example of plants. Now, it is over the last 10 years, maybe more, 10, 15, 20 years even maybe, there's been a lot of research done on the communication between plants. Now, I know this has been brought up in a couple of lessons ago as well. There's been a lot of research done in the communication between plants under the soil. So trees, for example, communicating with each other under the ground. Now, they use rhizome networks or mycelium networks, or that's a fancy word for fungus or fungi. So fungal networks under the ground actually connect between the roots of different individual plants or trees, and they actually allow for the transfer of chemicals and transfer of information through those fungal networks. So things like water can be transferred between plants and other chemicals, other nutrients and things like that. And it's apparent that, say, a parent tree will tend to push nutrients out to its siblings that are around, and it goes under the ground. So now I should mention here that this is starting to become accepted, mainstream scientific fact. Although it is contested in places as well. It takes a long time for scientific facts to actually really become accepted in the scientific community. So there is some pushback in some areas, and it's not 100% accepted. But there are many papers already that exist which show or give some evidence towards it. So why are we mentioning it? Well, because it's an example of networks. It's an example of networks in nature. It's an example of individuals working or communicating in a network where those individuals come together and could even be called one entity or one network. So we want to raise that as an example of how this already happens in nature. And what we're going to suggest with the collective mind is nothing like this description of plants, but it's an example of a network. That's why we're bringing it up. So let's talk first of all about the subtle energy biosphere that surrounds the planet before we talk about the collective mind, because the collective mind is part of a greater biosphere made out of subtle energy. Now, the subtle energy biosphere is something which surrounds the planet, which is emitted by all forms of life. So it's made of subtle energy or magnetic fields, but anything that is alive is going to be part of that biosphere. So anything that's part of life is going to be part of that energy biosphere. That includes plants, that includes insects, that includes bacteria. Everything is part of that subtle energy biosphere. Now, the collective mind is a sort of subset of that energy biosphere, and it includes anything that has mind. So this is a different set of animals, a different set of life forms that specifically have mind. And that's really related to nervous systems and brains. So the collective mind, and in this lesson, we're going to talk about it mainly in terms of humans. But of course, all animals that have mind are connected to the collective mind. So the collective mind is a network of mind which is made of subtle energy, which links all the individuals in the network. So everybody that has a mind is linked into the network. Now, there's some really good analogies we can use, such as the internet, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. But the internet is a connection between lots of different computers, isn't it? So think about all of the computers that are existing on the planet. They're all connecting to the internet. Basically, that just means they're all connecting to each other. Well, the collective mind is a little bit like that, with lots of minds connecting to each other. And that allows, or we could say that has evolved as a type of hive system. Now, this is another example of what happens in nature as well, a hive system. We talked about this a few lessons ago as well. A hive system exists in nature already. You know, bees form hive systems, termites, ants, that sort of thing, where you've got lots of different individuals in the group, and really they're working together, they're communicating and working together in a network, and it's almost like they're one entity, really. And they have lots of different types and functions of individuals, but generally speaking, it functions as one entity. So you could say that the collective mind, now I know we used this analogy in when we were talking about higher minds, didn't we, in the last lesson? Well, it's the same thing here, because that's what we're talking about, the collective mind. It involves all individuals with mind, but here in this lesson, we're talking mainly about humans. So humans are all linked into this hive system, this collective higher mind. And it allows for the transfer of different things between individuals. The transfer of all sorts of things, whether it's communication, whether it's different types of energy. But this is all made of subtle energy, of course. So it's very, very different to the plants example, because the plants example are communicating under the ground through fungal networks. That's made of matter. That's material. So this is very different. It's made of subtle energy, but it still allows for the transfer of different things. And you know, this is a course on healing, isn't it? And healing involves, or energy healing involves, the transfer of energy between people. So we use the collective mind all the time for this purpose, for healing. But it's happening all the time naturally as well, because it's part of our nature, it's part of our biology, it's part of our anatomy, and it's evolved over millions and millions of years. And there's natural reasons why it exists. And at some point, one day in the future, science will catch up to this. So how is it formed? Because it's made of something, and it hasn't been detected yet by science. And by the way, I should say, it hasn't been detected by science yet, but it's been known about ever since humans have existed, really. And it's been called all sorts of different things, the spirit world, for example. But it's been known culturally that there is this collective mind and the astral planes all lumped in together, really. But that's been known culturally, and it's part of all sorts of ancient cultures already. So it has been known intuitively by humans for a long, long time. But it's not known in the scientific mainstream because they haven't found evidence for it yet. Now, how is it formed? So, like I said, it's magnetic fields. Similar to our bioenergy anatomy, which is made of magnetic fields or subtle energy. Well, it's the same thing here. It's a collective, you could say it's a collective energy body. And these are traditional words like chi and prana that you probably have heard of, and most people have heard of those type of words. Just put that in there to show that this type of energy has been known about for a long time. So it's made of magnetic fields. Now, before we carry on with the collective mind, I want to talk about the Earth's magnetic field, because it is very much involved in the collective mind. So the planet has a magnetic field. The planet is a big magnet with a north and a south pole, and that creates a magnetic field around it. So the reason why the planet is a magnet is because of the Earth's core. The Earth's core, in the center of the Earth, there's a iron and nickel core, and the inner core is solid. The outer core is moving. It's constantly moving around, and it causes this big magnet effect. So the Earth has this big magnetic field around it, and these lines that you can see coming out of the North Pole are called magnetic meridians. So they come out of the North Pole and they curve around like that, and they go all the way down to, and then they curve back into the South Pole. And there is a direction to them, and it goes from north to south. The direction is actually magnetic flux. So it's actually, and magnetic fields is subtle energy, let's not forget. And so there is a movement of subtle energy from north to south. Now, this part is obviously completely part of mainstream, and we've known about magnetic fields for a long, long time. And that's how navigation started, wasn't it? Because that's what a compass does. The needle on a compass aligns with magnetic north and points to the North Pole. So that's been used for hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, this is very important when it comes to the collective mind. The collective mind is mind energy. So it's part of our subtle energy frameworks, part of the higher mind actually. There's some organs in there which actually give off this mind energy. So the higher mind gives off a sphere of mind energy, and it goes quite far out. And I would say, I mean, in this diagram, these two are very close together, but I'd say it goes out, almost a kilometer or so. And it connects up with other people's mind energy. Now, by the way, the idea of the collective mind is a popular thing already. It's not accepted in science, of course, but it's accepted in many other circles, even psychology sometimes. For example, Carl Jung had a theory about the collective unconscious. So this idea permeates into the mainstream, even though it's not a scientific fact. So mind energy gets beamed out in all directions from each individual, and it links up with other people's mind energy. Now imagine that on a global scale. Imagine that all around the planet. So what happens is that it creates this blanket all around the planet. Wherever there are people, or wherever there is mind, it actually creates this blanket around the planet. So you could say that it looks a little bit like this, possibly, if you could see it. Now, the interesting thing here is that mind energy that gets beamed out everywhere, it gets anchored on the Earth's magnetic field. It actually runs through the Earth's magnetic field. It's all interconnected and woven together. So this is this blanket or collective mind which exists around the planet. And it exists, it doesn't go through the Earth, it doesn't go through the planet, because there's no people inside the planet. The people are on the surface, aren't they? So there's going to be some sort of film, or it's going to extend certain distance up and a certain distance down, because it comes from that sphere of mind energy which is surrounding every person. Now, there are some features of this collective mind which are very well known already, and one of them are these lines. Now, I'm sure everyone here has heard of the term ley line, and I think we've even talked about it in the last lesson or a couple of lessons ago. So ley lines are very well known and very well documented. Ley lines are straight lines that are going through the collective mind, but they are kind of permanent fixtures in the collective mind. Because they've been used so much, they've become permanent. And they are for communication and travel through the collective mind. So they're like major highways that run through the collective mind, like motorways connecting certain points. That's what ley lines are. So different things actually run through the collective mind, or can be sent through the collective mind, or travel through the collective mind. Things like telepathy. In between higher minds is constant telepathy between higher minds. Entities that are traveling back and forth, moving here and there. For example, Krishnamurti came along and said hello last time, didn't he? Well, he would have used a major ley line to get here. He would have then taken a side road, you could say. It's a bit like a network of roads. And energy healing can travel across the collective mind. Emotional energy can travel across the collective mind. And also these things called orbs, which I know some of you are very familiar with, these round balls of energy which have something to do with communication between higher minds, I think. Another thing worth mentioning in the structure of the collective mind is what I call eddies. Now, this is just a word I use because I see them out there in the collective mind. And by the way, I should mention you can see the collective mind if you try hard enough. You can see, first of all, you can see the golden energy around you. Sometimes with a black background, you can see a fuzzy golden haze. That's golden energy. You can also see it in other ways as well. Sometimes you see little flashes of bluish specks or color. If you really concentrate hard enough, if you concentrate on that golden energy sometimes that you can see with a black background, you can actually start to see, if you concentrate on it for some time, you can actually start to see a little fabric pattern, a little crisscrossy fabric pattern. Those are little tubules, little tubes that run through the collective mind. Tiny, tiny, tiny. But there are different tubes of different sizes that run through the collective mind. Chakra cords is an example of one. We'll talk about that in a bit, though. So just coming back to these eddies. Now, I see these eddies somewhere, and I've called them eddies because of my maritime background, because I see eddies all the time in the sea. Eddies are a whirlpool in the sea or in water. If you can imagine moving your hand really quickly through water, it creates these little spinning effects. Those are called eddies. Now, the collective mind has these eddies, and you can see them sometimes, and they do literally look like this diagram here, and they are massive, and they spiral up into the atmosphere. Now, this is due to the Earth's spin, and the reason is because in the core of the planet, the outer core is molten. And because of the Earth's spin, it actually causes whirlpools or spinning effects in that molten core. That's a little bit like how our weather works. Now, you might have heard of the term Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect is because of the Earth's spin. Now, this is all mainstream. Now I'm talking mainstream stuff. Because of the Earth's spin, the air pressure goes from high to low in a spinning motion. That's why our storms, our weather systems, have a spinning motion. One way in the northern hemisphere and the other way in the southern hemisphere. That's Coriolis effect. Same thing's happening in the Earth's core, and the Earth's core is producing the magnetic field of the planet. So this is why we see these eddies in the magnetic field. And this allows movement. This allows movement between the different layers of the collective mind, because what we're going to talk about in a minute is all about movement, the dynamic collective mind. There's all sorts of energy movements through the collective mind constantly. We'll get to that in a sec. In fact, we'll get to it now, because the collective mind is dynamic. Any questions so far before I carry on? All right, so the dynamic collective mind. Now, the collective mind is always in a state of flux and movement, and there's all sorts of things that are moving around, and there's all sorts of reasons why it's dynamic. So let's talk about the first one, and that is the movement of people. That is the movement of people around the world. So if you think about the collective mind, it's being generated by people because of this sphere of energy being beamed out in this sphere around each person. So if you can imagine it on a collective level, when people move around, big shifts in population, that collective mind also shifts around. Now, I'm going to talk about some telepathy experiments in a bit that myself and my mother did years ago. And we actually found that it was different. The telepathy or the energy that we sent between us would actually take different times depending on where we were. And it would also shift a little bit depending on the time, or whether it was we'd try in one location and then we'd try in the same location the next day, and it would shift a little bit. The time taken between the transfer from one place to another would change. Therefore, we deduced that it was taking a different route around the collective mind each time, which you could infer that actually that collective mind is shifting slightly, and so it has to take a different route through the collective mind every time. So the movement of people makes this collective mind shift. Now, don't forget that the collective mind is a subset of the subtle energy biosphere, and it's anchored around the magnetic field lines of the planet. So that's the next thing that can make it dynamic. It's the movement of the planet. So imagine this: there's magnetic field lines that are bouncing, that are in different positions, coming out of the planet's core, a bit like this. It's not exactly like this, but here's an example. Now imagine, because of the inner core, the movement of the inner core, the outer core is molten, not the inner core. The outer core of the planet is molten. Therefore, there's lots of movement in it. Therefore, the magnetic fields are actually going to move. So they can shift like this. So because of that molten core, those magnetic field lines are shifting back and forth all the time. So these magnetic field lines, they open and close, you could say. And mind energy actually goes through these magnetic field lines because it's anchored on these magnetic field lines. So when the magnetic fields shift, then a new route opens up, and then mind energy jumps through that new route. So it's always shifting about. So that mind energy just finds its way through the magnetic field lines of the planet. So that's another reason why it's constantly dynamic. And yet another reason why it's dynamic is what we can call planetary breathing. And that has to do with the moon. So the Earth has a very strong magnetic field because of the iron and nickel core. The moon does not have a very strong magnetic field. It doesn't have a core like that. It's got a very weak magnetic field, but it still interacts with the Earth's magnetic field. But it also interacts in another way, and that is through gravity. Because that's why the moon is going around the Earth, of course, due to the Earth's gravity, the Earth and the moon's gravity. Now, gravity has an impact on matter. Gravity has a massive impact on matter. Now, the moon's gravity will actually change the shape of the Earth. Now, it has this effect. Oh, your heart. Now, you can see the effect that the moon's gravity has on the Earth very clearly with water, of course. That's what creates the tides. It also has an impact on the matter. Now, the tides race around the planet, following the moon, basically. But the matter also changes. So the matter of the Earth will actually flex like that. Now, this is all part of mainstream accepted fact, of course. Whenever we're talking about mind energy, we're going in off the accepted mainstream fact. But magnetic fields and gravity is all part of mainstream science. So the effects that the moon can have on the planet. So the effects of gravity on magnetic fields. So gravity affects matter, and then matter is giving off the magnetic field, isn't it? So as the moon comes around the planet, it has a massive impact on the matter in that planet. It has a massive impact on the core of that planet, and the core is dishing out the magnetic field. So that's how that's how the moon's gravity can impact the magnetic fields on the planet. It's through the flexing of the Earth itself, and it has a massive impact on the magnetic fields, and it has a massive impact on the collective mind. So that's gravity. There's also an effect that the moon's magnetic field has on the planet. The moon's magnetic field is very, very weak, but it still interacts with the Earth's magnetic field. So every time it goes round, it has an impact on the Earth's magnetic field, and it has an impact on all the subtle energies that are part of the collective mind. So you could call it an expansion and contraction every month. And the strong effects of gravity are intensified at certain times of the month. So at new moon, for example, or at full moon, that's when the moon and the sun are lined up. So there's a double impact of gravity because the sun has a huge pull of gravity. Even though it's very, very far away compared to the moon, it has a massive impact in gravity. So when the moon is going around the earth and the sun's over here, let's say, when the moon and the sun are lined up, that's when you have full moon or new moon. And that corresponds with spring tides and neap tides. So it's a monthly expansion and contraction, and it goes up and down, or it breathes. That's why we can say that it's like the planet breathing. Yes, spring tides are when the tidal range is the highest, and neap tides are when they are the lowest, basically. So if you ever look at a tidal book, you'll see that the tidal range is really big. Say around here, it's probably like 5 or 6 meters in spring tides, but then it goes down to about 1.5 meters in neap tides. Well, I think that the magnetic fields of those planets probably have negligible effect on the Earth's magnetic fields, but the gravity does. We are affected by the gravity of the other planets, but it's going to be quite weak compared to the gravity of the sun because the sun is so massive, and fairly weak compared to the gravity of the moon because the moon is so close. So say Jupiter, for example, is a very big planet, but it's so far away compared to the moon. The moon is very, very tiny, but it's so close, it has a much bigger impact on the Earth. So yeah, but I think the answer is that yes, they do have an impact on the gravity, so they will have some sort of impact. But I think that there's a high percentage that we could say that there's nothing in it. But like a lot of these myths, there are grains of truth. There are usually grains of truth, but you've got to go digging so far to find those grains of truth. And I think with astrology, quite often, I think the grains of truth lie somewhere in the infinite plan of the source, somewhere in the planetary cycles and the connection of the planetary cycles and the individuals who are who are spiritually evolving on that planet towards self-realization. So there are links. There are links between these things. I don't think it's complete nonsense, but the problem is you go and read a horoscope in a newspaper, and it's been taken so far down the line that you can call it nonsense, basically. Yeah, I think it would absolutely. Yeah, not only just because of the movement of the collective mind, but also the shift in different types of people moving in different places. Because as we're going to talk about in a minute, the uploading of emotional energy has a massive impact on the collective mind. But yeah, absolutely, it would have a big impact. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so what this does is it creates more flow in the biosphere. So the magnetic effects of the moon's magnetic field, but also the gravitational effects have a massive impact on the flow of golden energy around the collective mind and the energy biosphere. And that's golden energy that we're talking about. And sometimes you can feel it. Sometimes you can feel the difference in the flow and movement of energy around the collective mind. And it does go in these monthly cycles. And that does create more experiences, strange experiences, all sorts of stuff. And this is ingrained in our popular mythology as well. Like werewolves, for example, or the term lunatics, or but it is documented that you get more strange experiences from people and animals at certain times of the month. And if you're into astral travel, or certainly if you notice your dreams a lot, you tend to get a lot more vivid dreams and astral experiences around full moon, around these times. So it definitely impacts certain experiences. It creates more energy flow in the collective mind. Therefore, that creates more energy flow through the energy body, because the energy body is connected to the collective mind. And if there's a lot of flow in the collective mind, then there's a lot of flow through energy bodies. And that actually creates these more vivid experiences, dreams, astral experiences. Now, having said all this, you could say that there is a better time of the month for distance healing, because the more flow there is around the planet, the better energy gets sent around the planet. Now, quite often we don't worry too much about this, because when it comes to higher mind healing, and we'll talk about that later on sometime, it gets sent through the brow chakra, and it gets sent in these little capsules that protect it and guide it along its way. So it doesn't make too much difference. But if we're teaching healing, then it's probably a good idea to mention this. If people are trying it out for the first time, then there are certain times of the month that it's going to work better than others, because that healing energy will actually get degraded along the way sometimes. So now let's talk about uploads and downloads. Because why are we connected to the collective mind? There's a reason why this has evolved in our evolutionary history. It's because we upload stuff and download stuff from the collective mind. And here's a list of things that get uploaded and downloaded. Not comprehensive, probably. Here's some examples. Emotions, our emotional energy gets uploaded to the collective mind. Our thoughts, all of our perceptions, what we're perceiving, whether we are awake or asleep, whatever we're perceiving gets uploaded. Telepathy can get uploaded, and healing energy, of course, because that's what this course is about. So we are constantly uploading and downloading information. Now remember this when we talk about the astral planes, perceptions especially, because the upload and download of perceptions is actually what is causing the astral planes, or what creates the astral planes. But don't worry, I'm going to talk about that in a second. So I've just talked a little bit about the movements of energy. But another note just to mention how important it is, because do you remember when we talked about the bioenergy layer? And we talked about golden energy. Now, we're going to talk more about this when we talk about anatomy. When we go through the anatomy lessons, we're going to talk about this. But basically, golden energy is a carrier system in the energy body. So a bit like in blood, where water is a carrier system. Most of blood is made of water. So blood is literally just mostly water with a few things added in. And that water carries things around the body for us, or that blood carries things around the body for us, namely oxygen and food and lots of other stuff. Now, in the same way, in the energy body, golden energy is also a carrier system. That's why we have to breathe it in all the time through our chakras. We are constantly bringing in golden energy, filtering it through the energy body, and then it gets grounded through our feet back to the earth. Now, golden energy is a carrier system for the energy body. It's also a carrier system for the collective mind. So you can actually imagine the collective mind just as a massive energy body, the energy body of the planet. It's a collective energy body, you could call it. So the movements of energy around the planet are all based around how much flow of golden energy there is around the planet. And all those tubes, chakra cords are tubes, ley lines are huge tubes. The flow of energy around those tubes dictates how well things get sent around the collective. So again, it's all about golden energy. All that flow of golden energy around. Okay, so now let's talk about some common health complaints. Now, I'm taking this subject and bringing it down to a clinical level. Let's say I'm calling these things health complaints, because there's lots of things in the collective mind that can cause people problems. But there's a lot of fear surrounding some of this stuff, and there's a lot of elaboration or exaggeration connected to some of this stuff. And then, whenever religion gets involved, then it explodes it to a completely different level. So certain things that can go wrong in the collective mind, I want to bring it back down to common health complaints. In the same way that people can get illnesses in the material body, get things wrong with them in the material body, and we can solve those things sometimes. The same way, there are things in the collective mind that can also cause problems. So let's talk about a few of these. And by the way, we're talking about these because, you know, occasionally we get people with some of these complaints and we have to know about them as healers. We have to know about them. And it does fall to, historically speaking, it does fall to healers to sort some of this stuff out. You know, even going back culturally, thousands of years, you know, it was always the healer in the group or the shaman or the medicine doctor or whatever that dealt with all this kind of stuff. So first of all, let's go through a few of these things. Magnetic viruses. You can pick up viruses from the collective mind. And of course, now we're completely out of the realms of mainstream science, of course. But in the same way that you can pick up a virus in the material body, we know them as viruses now, we know how they work, we know their DNA structure, things like common cold or whatever it is. These have been around for so long, and they used to be called demons, didn't they? They used to be thought of as demons. Taken over, your body's taken over by demons in some way. Now, scientific revolution came along, and we started to understand more about what those viruses are. Now, the same thing's going to happen at some point with magnetic viruses. So you can actually pick up these magnetic viruses, or people can pick them up. Some people call them attachments. But these viruses sometimes will latch on to people, and they'll cause a big draining of energy quite often. In other times, it's also possible for a telepathic link to happen with those magnetic viruses. So people can hear voices in their head. Now, there's lots of different causes for hearing voices, and so I'm not saying that anyone who hears voices has got a magnetic virus. It's just one particular option that can be the case sometimes. So these are very easy to get rid of. You can just get rid of them with a simple intention. Now, some people, it's not so easy to get rid of them, and that's why people get these attached to them, and they can not know about it and not be able to get rid of it. Because the higher mind has to evolve the capability to look after itself and sort out its own defenses. So you can get people turn up who are, their higher mind is a sleeping higher mind, and in that case, quite often the higher mind is not defending itself from these viruses. But they're very easy to get rid of in the same way as our body, our material body will attack viruses with antibodies. We generally, the higher mind generally grows defenses to these type of things through the journey of spiritual evolution. So that's one thing that can happen. Negative energies can happen as well. And here what we're talking about is emotional energy. So when somebody feels a negative emotion, that gets uploaded to the collective mind. And that can actually stick to people. And you know, when you experience this, you'll understand it. And if you're sensitive to energy, you'll understand that it's not very nice. It can activate your own emotional response, and it can also stick to you and wrap itself around you. And it's just energy. It's not like an entity or anything. But people can get that stuck to them as well and not realize it. And especially if somebody they know is constantly creating this negative energy, and they're constantly getting affected by it. So that can sometimes happen. Okay, now we go into a couple of things that can happen is entities. So in the collective mind, there are hundreds and thousands of people in between incarnations. There's all sorts of things in the collective mind, actually, but when we haven't got time to go through everything here, but I'm just going through the main things here. But there are lots of people in between incarnations in the collective mind. Now, here this category is unaware people, because sometimes a soul can stick to a person or hang about that person and don't realize it's happening. Quite often they might not even know that they've died, or sometimes they're attached by chakra cords and they can't get away. So, and quite often they will not know that they're doing some harm, because the person in the material body, the living person, will be affected by the energies of this person. So it will be quite difficult for them. It will be unpleasant. But the person who has died is unaware of it. So in this case, we just have to separate those people and help that person on their journey, basically. So that can happen. The next one is similar. However, you can get mischievous people, people who are up to no good. Because in the material plane, quite clearly, there's lots of people who have malicious intent in the material plane. Well, that doesn't change in the collective mind and astral planes. So you can have entities that are hanging around, that are actually trying to do some harm, who are doing negative stuff. So in both of these cases, you can still just move them on. You know, if somebody is being mischievous, then or trying to cause harm, then they are going to be of a fairly low spiritual development level, because the higher mind is going to be a sleeping higher mind and therefore have no control. It's going to be the lower mind that's doing it. So they're not going to have that much power, but the people who they are bothering, they may be sleeping higher minds as well. So they may not have developed the defenses necessary to ward off these people. So again, you just move them on. You can just quite easily move them on. And you've got to treat them with compassion, of course, because they are a soul and they are a person, but they just have to be moved on so they stop causing trouble. Someone got a question there? Yeah, so that's what I mean here. Yeah, they can be doing that intentionally. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the answer is simple. Look out the window into the world and you can see lots of people trying to do harm to others. Nothing, it doesn't change when you go into the astral planes and collective mind. It's exactly the same thing that's going on, you know. And in the astral planes, it's a similar thing. And I'll talk about the astral planes in a minute, actually, so I won't carry on with that. But the answer is that they are it's the lower mind. So, but don't forget, the lower mind and all its conditioning is what can be malicious. The higher mind can't be. But if it's a sleeping higher mind, it doesn't have any control. And also, don't forget that the true self of that person is pure awareness. It's just in a sleeping state, really. So they deserve our compassion, of course, and help and support. But in terms of some people, you've just got to move them on and get them away from whatever harm they're doing. Yeah. So they're in the ground plane. When somebody dies and they leave their body, they're in the ground plane, and this is where all this sort of stuff can happen. This is the closest plane to the material plane. So if somebody is hanging around the house, and this is where you get all these stories of hauntings and things like that. If somebody is hanging around the house, they're in the ground plane, and what that person is seeing is a mixture of a dream, but also seeing the ground plane, which is a copy of the material plane. So they're half in a dream and half seeing the people they're bothering, let's say. So what you're doing is actually is taking them by the hand and moving them to another part of the collective mind. And it's in the astral planes that they see that light. So in the astral planes, which I'll talk about in a second, that's the virtual reality. That's what they're experiencing and seeing in their dream. But so the light that you're talking about is in the astral planes, and that's a portal to the astral planes, i.e., most likely in this case it'll be the root chakra plane that you'll be moving them onto. But in the collective mind, you're just moving them from one place to another, because I think you go to different sort of places in the collective mind as you go through the different stages in between incarnations. So basically you're moving them from one place to another in the collective mind, but what they're experiencing is that they're seeing the light going through that portal, and then they find themselves in the plane that their spiritual development has got to. And in this case, most likely the root chakra plane or the sacral. No, and then quite often you get people to come and help them as well. And this is what that is actually starting to form soul families, because soul families start at an early age, you could say, and quite often people become a part of a soul family without even their higher mind being awake higher mind. And that's a case of being looked after, being taken under somebody's wing. So quite often when you're doing that, you will actually grab somebody and say, look after this person, they're part of your soul family now. So We are talking about the astral planes now. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the lesson, the astral planes is part two of the collective mind lesson. So we will talk about the astral planes in good detail in the second part of this lesson. But it's worth just having a couple of slides here just to talk about the astral planes, just so that you're aware of what we mean when we're using the term astral planes. And the astral planes have been is a well-known term already. It's the word astral. I think comes from a Sanskrit word originally, and I think it means of the stars. That's its meaning. But it's used to describe a part of the collective mind. So, what are the astral planes? Well, the best way to think of the astral planes is that it is the virtual reality of the collective mind. So we've been talking about the collective mind in terms of its structure, mainly in magnetic fields and its impacts and certain things that move around the collective mind. But that's talking about its structure. What about what you experience? Because let's say people in between incarnations, they're not experiencing just a load of movements of magnetic fields. They're not seeing all these magnetic fields flying about. What are they actually seeing when they are in the collective mind, in between incarnations, let's say? What are they seeing? It's like a virtual reality. Now, the best way to describe this is to use the internet analogy. So if you think about the internet, your computer that you're on right now is connected to the internet. Everybody's computer is connected to the internet. You're seeing something on the screen. You're seeing pictures or moving pictures on your screen. Now, in the internet, the cables that connect all the computers together, or the wireless systems, whatever you want to call it, but all that stuff that connects all the computers together is the structure or the fabric of the collective mind in the analogy. But what you're seeing on your screen, that's the astral planes in that analogy. So it's what people are seeing inside their conscious awareness filter. That's what the astral planes are. So the astral planes don't really have a location. It's like the internet doesn't really have a location. The cloud, for example, the internet cloud, there's no location. It's happening on each individual computer. That's what the astral planes are. So if you wanted a location of where the astral planes are, it's happening in the filter of every person. Now, the astral planes are a world of possibilities because they are a little bit like a dream dimension. They are a collective dream dimension. So people are uploading their perceptions to the collective mind. And you can also download from the collective mind. So because it's a kind of like a dream world, it's not solid like the material plane. And it can change drastically. You can invent all sorts of stuff on the astral planes. But what people are experiencing in the astral planes, if it happens for long enough, it becomes real inside the astral planes. So people have been connected to the astral planes for millions of years. And if they constantly are experiencing the same things, the same dream, let's say, then that dream becomes reality in the astral planes, which is why the astral planes have worlds within them. They have worlds within them. They have cities and towns. They have countryside. They have mountain ranges. They have all sorts of stuff in them. So there is no limits to what can exist in the astral planes. And that's why they are such a fascinating field of study and fascinating to go and travel around. And astral travel is a big thing out there in the world. It's almost like a hobby for some people. Now, the astral planes are constructed of planes of frequency. Now, if you can imagine everyone uploading their perceptions. Now, everybody is at different stages of spiritual development. We talked about this last week in the reincarnation lesson. Everyone is on different stages of development, different rungs of the ladder of spiritual development. So they are perceiving different levels of spiritual development. Now, as energy gets uploaded into the collective mind, it sorts itself out into frequencies of perception. And you can call these levels of frequencies planes. you can also relate them back to chakras. Because as we know from last lesson, the chakras in the Kundalini system relate to spiritual evolution. They also relate to layers of frequency, because each chakra processes different levels of frequency. So the astral planes layer themselves like this, and this is what causes the astral planes. And these are different planes of experience, of existence within the collective mind. So somebody on the level of the root chakra spiritual development can exist within the root chakra plane, but they can't go up higher because they haven't evolved to process those higher frequencies of energy. But let's say somebody on the heart chakra plane, they can't go higher either than the heart chakra plane, but they can go lower. They can go to the solar plexus, the sacral, or the root chakra plane, because they've already evolved through those frequencies. So that's kind of how it works. But that's all we're going to talk about in terms of the astral planes in this lesson, just to give you an idea of what the astral planes are exactly. We'll talk about that in part 2. So now let's talk about sending energy, because this is a massive part of energy healing, of course. You've got to send energy. It is possible to send energy across the collective mind, as we've talked about already. Energies are flying about everywhere in the collective mind. It's a dynamic collective mind. Golden energy is the carrier system. Golden energy is a bit like the rivers of golden energy flowing through the collective mind. And if you want to send a message to somebody, you drop the message in the river, and it will get carried downstream. It's a bit like that. So the relevant things to us that you can send across the collective mind is healing energy, emotional energy, and telepathy. Now, in terms of healing, it's mostly healing energy and emotional energy that we use, that we send to people. Because either you're giving somebody an emotional boost, like sending love, for example, or you're sending healing energy to try and actually fix something in their bodies. Telepathy, you could say, is a broad term just for sending anything, really. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about this now. In this lesson, telepathy really just means the transfer of energy from one place to another. And that can be healing energy, emotional energy, it can be a message, it can be all sorts of things. But how does this energy actually transfer? Well, here we have to go to anatomy. And don't worry, we're going to talk about anatomy. We've got all our lessons on anatomy coming up as well. So this is a picture of the energy body. And as you can see, there are cords coming off the major chakras. Now, these are called chakra cords, and they connect between people. So this goes through this mind energy, which gets beamed out everywhere. So chakra cords is a part of that. And chakra cords link up with other people's chakra cords. Energy can get transferred in between. For example, emotional energy, if you want to send love, it can come out of the heart chakra and go through the heart chakra cord. If you're in the vicinity of somebody and you're giving energy healing to them with your hands, that is coming out of the hand chakras through a chakra cord. Now, on this diagram, there's no chakra cord coming out of the hands, but you can see the chakra opening there on the palm of the hand. There is a chakra in the palm of each hand. There's also a chakra in the palm of each foot as well. That's for grounding into the earth. Anyway, hand chakras, you can send energy if you're very close to somebody. You can actually send healing energy through any of the major chakras as well if you're in the vicinity of somebody. So in energy healing, you don't actually have to use your hands. You can sit in the same room as somebody and still be sending energy healing to them through any of the major chakras. Now, this is something that's probably happening in many cases and people just don't realize, because this happens automatically as well. Like, for example, counselors, psychotherapists, when they're sitting talking to somebody, there's probably energy healing going on of some kind, or emotional energy healing happening as part of that discussion. It's just the two people are most likely unaware of it, because it actually evolved for this purpose. Now, the next one here, the brow chakra. The brow chakra is part of the major chakras, of course, but I mention it here because the brow chakra has a specialized role to it, and it evolved for the purpose of telepathy. So when we want to send healing energy over vast distances, then we have to use the brow chakra. So now we're going to talk about telepathy, because the assignment for this lesson is actually telepathy experiments. So we're going to get everyone together in pairs and send energy and telepathy between ourselves. I'll talk about that in a second, but first of all, telepathy. What different types of telepathy are there? There are three main types of telepathy. There is lower mind telepathy, higher mind telepathy, and akashic telepathy. Now, the type that we use in healing is higher mind telepathy, and that's the one we're going to be using in the assignment. But lower mind telepathy exists, and lower mind telepathy is that type of telepathy which everyone has experienced, that you get between two people, especially if those two people have known each other for a long time. You know, it's that time where you're both thinking of the same things, like, oh, I was just thinking that type of thing. Also, if you know somebody's just about to call, phone call or something like that, that's usually lower mind telepathy. Now, lower mind telepathy, I think, evolved a long time ago in early animals, because animals are telepathic. And there's been loads of research done on animals. You can look at Rupert Sheldrake's research, and he's written a couple of books on it as well. I think one of his books was called something like "Why Your Dog Knows When You're Coming Home" or something like that. So, and you can imagine lower mind telepathy happening in animals, things like groups of lions or wolves hunting together. Using telepathy. That's why they're so coordinated. That's why it's they're so coordinated without actually communicating verbally or anything. Now, higher mind telepathy is between higher minds. So this is happening all the time without us realizing. But we can use it consciously, which is what we're going to do in the assignment. Now, akashic telepathy is something completely different. Now, I mention it here just because we need to know about it, but it's not something we're going to be studying in this course. We talk about it, we go into it in another course in the astral team, but it's not really part of this course for the moment. It might be in the advanced energy healing lesson. I'm not sure yet. But basically what akashic telepathy is very different from lower mind and higher mind telepathy. So lower mind and higher mind telepathy, basically you are sending energy from A to B through the collective mind. You are sending a form of energy, whether it's a message, healing energy, emotional energy, doesn't really matter. You are sending something across the collective mind from one person to another. Now, akashic telepathy is completely different. It doesn't work that way. In fact, it is going through what we call non-physical reality, which means it goes through the source. That means it's instantaneous. There is no transfer of energy going on at all. So it's a completely different type of telepathy. But you could say it's also a very advanced form of telepathy that only happens as you go through Kundalini awakening and self-realization. But that's another story. Talk some more about it. So telepathy, let's include, so we're just talking about the higher mind telepathy now. So if we're going to send anything through telepathy, we use the brow chakra, because the brow chakra is designed to send it over distances. So first of all, let's talk about some telepathy experiments that myself and my mother Josie did together a while back, years ago. I want to talk about those experiments quickly to give you a general idea of the assignment that we're going to do. Now, we spent like around a year or so doing these experiments, so there's a lot of results and there's a lot of complexity to it that we can't include in this course. So the assignments that we're going to do is just like a simplified version of it, just to make it easier and quicker to do it in one assignment. So let me just explain approximately what we did. So we sent energy, we recorded sending energy to each other in different locations. And sometimes I was traveling around, sometimes I was in Turkey or Greece, for example. Other times I was here in Cornwall, she was in Devon. And we recorded the results. So we would organize a particular time, and we would sometimes organize what we were going to send, and then other times it would be a surprise. And in this particular example. This is an example of some of our results. And in this particular one, we were sending these symbols. You can see in the top right-hand corner there. And these are called Zener symbols. These are symbols that are often used in telepathy experiments. So she would send, and I would receive the energy. And I would receive it and this took a while to develop, but I would receive it in certain packets of energy. So I would note the time where these packets of energy would actually arrive. And one important thing to note here is these little drawings. I would feel the energy arrive. It would hit my brow chakra and sort of vibrate through my body, and I would draw it. I would draw the wave as it was coming through. So, for example, here, now I'm not going to ask you guys to do this because it's too much for an assignment, but we're going to simplify it down. And also Sally and Jules have already done this, so they might be able to add some direction in a bit as well. But here's an example of what we were doing anyway. So you can see a circle. The wave of a circle is very different to the wave of a star, for example. And here's some more. And some of these little packets of energy, you could actually note the time in between. It would be the same time every time for each one. So the black circle, for example, you get these. You get an arrival signal. It's strange. You get an arrival signal for all of them, which is like that was time 0. That's when it arrived, and then it would go on this wave, and then you get these different peaks at different times. It will always be the same for that particular image or symbol. And here's another example here of a circle with a slightly different wave to it, less pointy, more rounded, with the time in between. You could even time the time in between the peaks. We did some other stuff as well, like we tried a bit of Morse code as well to see if that would work. We didn't spend too much time on Morse code. What we did do though was we tried binary. So here's an example of some results of using binary. Now, binary is ones and zeros, a string of numbers, always 1 or 0. And 1 means on, and 0 means off. So we would send the energy in little short blips and at particular times. In sequence, and if I would receive something, that would be a 1, and if there was nothing there, that would be a 0. So those are some of the examples of what we were doing. Now, very important, one of the most important things I think to understand now about these telepathy experiments, and probably the ones that you're going to do, and I think probably, hopefully, you'll find the same thing, is that there are a number of errors which occur. There's always some errors. They're not always right. They're not always 100% correct. There's a certain percentage, which I think it's about 50-50, to be honest, 50%, 50%. And these errors are what we call twisted intuition. Now, we're going to talk a lot about intuition in the lessons on intuition, so I will go over this in detail. But why is it to do with intuition? Well, the reason is because it's higher mind telepathy. And the higher minds are sending something between the higher minds. But then the results have to be passed into the lower mind. And that is communication. That's higher mind communication, isn't it? That's intuition. Now we know very well, and to be honest, it was these experiments really that really solidified this knowledge of the twist in intuition. That whenever higher mind communicates with lower mind, there is a twist. There is some inbuilt errors to it. Now, if you want to know why there's inbuilt errors in intuition, I think it has to do with the blindness of the age of suffering of humanity. Humanity goes through an age of suffering on the planet. And part of that suffering is a blindness to the astral planes, a blindness to reincarnation, a blindness to the soul, a blindness to the source of the universe. That's part of the age of suffering. And this twisted intuition is a part of that. You could almost say that lower minds aren't allowed totally correct information from their higher minds through that time period. But what happens is that when you go through self-realization, that intuition very gradually untwists. It very gradually gets more and more correct as you go through self-realization. So very important to always remember the twist in intuition. That goes, if you're doing telepathy experiments, it also applies to intuition in general, which we'll talk about more in the intuition lesson. Right, so let's talk about the assignment. So it's sending each other energy. So we're going to get you into pairs, and this doesn't have to be time consuming, by the way. This can be done very quickly, but you will have to organize with each other in pairs about a time to send something and receive something. And there's certain things that we want to suggest. So, you know, I gave you the what myself and my mother did, but you don't have to do exactly like that. I'm going to give you a suggestion of what you can do, but you can muck around with it yourselves. The first thing to remember is chakra doors. Now, each of your chakras has a little opening, an opening closing mechanism. So the first thing to be aware of, or to make sure of, is that your brow chakra door is open. These are just, I mean, they don't look like doors, they're just an opening and closing mechanism. So you just visualize your brow chakra and visualize that door opening. You can visualize your door however you want to visualize it. Visualize it opening and see if it stays open. Because when I first started doing this, I was visualizing, I looked at the chakra and I opened the door, but then it kept getting slammed shut on me. So something to be aware of, and try and make sure that that door is open while you're sending energy. Also, you probably want to be spending a bit of time thinking about your partner just before you send the energy, or any time really. Just start thinking about them more. That will start building a connection. So we've arranged this in days, like day 1, day 2, day 3. So we've done 7 of these examples, but again, it only has to take 5 minutes or 5-10 minutes for each one, and you don't have to do it once a day. It's completely up to you. But the first example is to send golden energy, nondescript golden energy. Now, we're going to give you a method here, and this is an example of what you can do, but really at the end of the day, it's up to you how you want to do it. But first of all, you want to visualize your brow chakra opening. Visualize the person's face. Now, you can visualize it right in front of you, or you can imagine them somewhere else in the UK or wherever, how far away. It's completely up to you, connected by a chakra cord. It's completely up to you. But really, once that door is open and you visualize their face, you want to then visualize a stream of energy leaving you through the brow chakra and then moving through space and into their brow chakra. Now, the details of how you do that is up to you, but that's the general gist of what you need to do. And you need to organize at the time that you're doing that, so that the receiver can sit there and clear their mind. They just need to clear their mind at that particular time and just wait. Just wait to see if anything happens. And by the way, I should mention, things might happen, but things might not happen. You know, it took us a long time to practice all this, and we're just doing this as, you know, part of a quick assignment. So if nothing happens, that's absolutely fine. Just move on. Just note that nothing's happened and move on. That might be the case. Or you might feel something. So we'll see. So that's day 1 and day 2. Next one is sending emotional energy. So the easiest one to really go for is love. So basically here you want to use the same procedure, but you want to try and evoke that feeling of love inside you. So if you can use a personal trigger, if you like, or if you're capable of just welling up that feeling of love inside your own heart, then great. Once you feel that feeling, then just imagine it or visualize it coming out of the brow chakra in the same way. Next one we're going to suggest is sending heat. Now, you can try this one. It might not work. We tried it a few times, and once or twice it did work, and it's quite incredible if it does work. But you can actually send somebody a hot flush. And again, the intention doesn't really matter, but you can visualize a fire or some hot colors or something like that traveling across. Completely up to you. but it can happen. So, and heat is actually involved in energy healing as well. So it's an interesting one to try. Next one you can try is one of these symbols, one of these Zener symbols. This is much more difficult. This is getting much more advanced. And sending energy is one thing. Sending symbol is a completely different thing. And it's unlikely that you may get the correct answer. It's more likely that you feel something and you're not sure what it is, maybe. But I don't know. We'll see. This is the first time we've done this assignment with anybody, to be honest with you, apart from Sally and Jules that did it together a while back to test it out. So we're very interested to see what the results are going to turn up. And then the last one here is send a word. This is probably the most difficult, and that is you choose a word and you think of that word in your mind, or you can say it over and over in your mind, or you can visualize the actual word. Either way, send it through the brow chakra. Right, and that's it really. So